For generations, whispers have circulated among paranormal circles about a bizarre and chilling mystery hidden in the hills of central Washington, a pit so unfathomably deep that anything cast into it vanishes without a trace. Locals say it defies the laws of physics, and some even claim it holds otherworldly powers. In the late 1990s, a man named Mel Waters stepped into the spotlight, asserting that this so-called bottomless hole was located on his property. But shortly after going public with his claims, Mel's life took a dark turn. He soon found himself tangled in what appeared to be a high-level cover-up, one that allegedly involved powerful branches of the U.S. government. Then, just as mysteriously as the hole itself, Mel vanished. Was Mel simply a master storyteller spinning a modern myth? Or is there a terrifying truth buried beneath the surface of this strange legend known as Mel's Hole? Throughout history, humanity has been drawn to the mysteries of what lies below. From yawning caverns to ancient wells, our collective imagination has long been captivated by the possibility that beneath our feet may lie portals to unknown realms. Some have even theorized that certain openings in the earth could serve as gateways to other worlds, other dimensions, or even other timelines. One such place existed in ancient Hierapolis, now part of modern-day Turkey. There stood a temple called the Plutonian, which the priests believed guarded an entrance to the underworld. Legend said that anyone who dared approach the sacred cave would fall dead on the spot. And even birds flying overhead were said to drop from the sky, lifeless, before ever reaching the ground. The Plutonian was no ordinary cave. It became the stage for chilling rituals. Animals were led to the entrance by worshippers, only to collapse moments later, suffocated by the poisonous fumes that seep from the darkness within. The participants needed only to stand back and watch as the invisible forces claimed their offerings. But this wasn't the only alleged gateway to the underworld. Deep in the Czech countryside lies Hauska Castle, a grim 13th century fortress shrouded in myth. Unlike most castles built to defend from external threats, Hauska's design is perplexing. Its thick stone walls face inward, as if meant to imprison something inside, something ancient and dangerous. At its core is a mysterious pit, rumored for centuries to be a direct passage to hell itself. To contain the evil believed to dwell within, the castle's builders constructed a chapel directly above the hole, a sacred seal of stone and faith, meant to guard against whatever unspeakable horrors might rise from below. And then, there's the story of Mel's Hole. Compared to these ancient legends, the tale of Mel's Pit may seem less dramatic. But it has held the public's imagination for nearly 3 decades. Why? Perhaps it's the sincerity with which Mel Waters told his story, or the way it seamlessly connects with age-old myths of forbidden places and hidden powers. Whatever the reason, the legend began the way many modern mysteries do, with a phone call. On the evening of February 21, 1997, a curious voice broke through the static of late-night radio. A man who introduced himself as Mel Waters called into Coast to Coast AM, the wildly popular program known for delving into the mysterious, the paranormal, and the unbelievable. Even Art Bell, the seasoned host no stranger to tales of UFOs and government cover-ups, was caught off guard by what he heard. Mel spoke with a calm, matter-of-fact tone. No drama, no flair. Yet what he described was astonishing. He claimed to own a remote stretch of land roughly 9 miles west of Ellensburg, Washington. Hidden on that property, nestled in the wooded terrain, was something truly bizarre. A perfectly round hole in the ground approximately 9 feet wide. Its interior lined with old stones, but it wasn't the structure that made it remarkable. It was what it seemed to defy. Neither Mel nor Art Bell could have known it at the time, but the conversation they were having would soon change both of their lives forever. As Mel spoke to the vast, unseen audience listening through Coast to Coast AM, he began sharing the strange and methodical experiments he had been conducting on the mysterious pit. After witnessing how countless objects could be tossed into the hole without producing so much as a sound, Mel grew obsessed with one question: just how deep was it? To find out, he devised a simple but clever experiment. He retrieved a spool of high-tensile fishing line, affixed a 1-pound lead weight, and began carefully lowering it into the hole. Using the length of line as a makeshift depth gauge, he expected at some point to feel the weight touch the bottom, but it never did. Each time he ran out of line, he simply tied on another spool and continued lowering, again and again. And still, the weight descended into darkness without resistance. By the time he paused, Mel claimed to have fed over 80,000 feet of fishing line into the abyss, more than 15 miles, with no sign of reaching the bottom. There was no tension, no vibration, no sound, and no hint that the weight had encountered anything solid. Realizing this approach wasn't enough to unlock the whole secrets, Mel began exploring other, more unconventional methods. Mel had already noticed that animals seemed deeply disturbed by the presence of the hole. His own dogs would refuse to approach it, often growling, barking, or even snapping at thin air whenever they were nearby. Birds gave the site a wide berth, and now that he thought about it, Mel realized something else. He had never seen a single insect near the pit's edge. Not a fly, not an ant. Nothing. Curious to learn whether other things might react to the anomaly, Mel decided to conduct a new kind of test. One day, he brought a portable radio with him to the site. As he approached the rim of the pit, something peculiar happened. The radio signal began to distort. A gentle hiss of static emerged, growing stronger the closer he moved toward the hole. Stepping back restored the signal, but stepping even closer caused something stranger. The station changed entirely. Mel described picking up faint warbled music, the kind you might expect to hear drifting from an old gramophone. In another instance, he tuned into what sounded like a live baseball game. But as he listened, he grew increasingly uneasy. The game wasn't live. It was a recording from the 1960s, a game that had already been played long ago. Disturbed but intrigued, Mel decided it was time to talk to the locals. He was still relatively new to the area, and perhaps the people who'd lived there longer had encountered other oddities tied to the hole. As it turned out, they had, and then some. While speaking with a neighbor one afternoon, Mel shared how his dogs reacted fearfully to the pit, whining, snapping at the air, refusing to go near it. That's when the man offered a story of his own. He explained that some time ago, his dog had died, and rather than go through the trouble of burying it, he'd done what many locals had long done with unwanted things. He tossed the body into the hole. But that, he said, was only the beginning. A few days later, while walking through the nearby woods, the man spotted something that stopped him cold. It was his dog, or at least it looked exactly like it. Same markings, same color, even the same collar. In disbelief, he called out to the animal, but it didn't respond. Instead, it simply turned and ran, vanishing into the trees. The man was left with a chilling certainty. This was his dog, back from the dead, yet no longer his. By now, Mel had been on the air with Art Bell for over an hour. The host thanked him for sharing what seemed like just another wild paranormal tale, odd, compelling, but one of many. He didn't yet realize that this was only the beginning. From 1997 to 2002, Mel would become a recurring guest on Coast to Coast AM, and each time he returned, his story grew stranger and darker. Soon after that first broadcast, things around Mel's property began to change. At first, it was subtle. Unfamiliar cars would crawl slowly down the road late at night, headlights off. Strangers he didn't recognize wandered near his land, always keeping their distance but watching. Then came the black helicopters, unmarked, silent, and ominous, hovering low above the trees at all hours, as if surveying something hidden. But the turning point came suddenly. One day, after a routine trip into town, Mel returned home to find the access road to his land completely sealed off. Waiting there were armed men in military uniforms, stone-faced and silent. And just like that, everything changed. When Mel demanded to know what was happening, one of the soldiers informed him that a plane had reportedly crashed on his property and that a government recovery operation was underway. It didn't make sense. No one in town had heard anything. No sirens, no smoke on the horizon, no signs of a wreck. Mel saw no flames, no debris, nothing to indicate any crash had taken place. Pressing for answers, he asked to speak to whoever was in charge. After a tense wait, a man in civilian clothes appeared, calm, composed, and unsettlingly direct. He informed Mel that the land had been reevaluated and was now considered federal property, placed under special jurisdiction due to environmental concerns. Just like that, Mel was no longer the owner of the land he'd once called home. But the government had a proposition. They would pay him $3 million per year to lease the land. In return, Mel would have to sign a non-disclosure agreement, leave the country immediately, and most importantly, never come back. It wasn't exactly a request. Mel understood the unspoken threat. With little choice, he agreed to the terms and soon found himself living in exile in Australia. He stayed there for 2 years. But even on the other side of the world, the memory of the hole and the secrecy surrounding it haunted him. Something never sat right. The story he'd been told felt like a cover, a manufactured lie to hide something far more disturbing. Eventually, Mel made a decision. He would return. He would reconnect with Art Bell and share what had happened, no matter the consequences. But the moment his plane touched down on the West Coast, things spiraled out of control. After 2 years abroad, Mel was eager to reunite with his family. During his time in Australia, he had been diagnosed with terminal cancer, and by his own estimate, he had only 6 months to live. Not long after returning to the United States, Mel boarded a bus headed toward a quiet reunion with his nephew. But fate had other plans. A fight broke out on board, forcing the driver to pull over and call law enforcement. Officers arrived quickly, questioned the passengers, and without much explanation, split them onto separate buses, sending everyone to their destinations. Everyone except Mel. Mel never arrived. Instead, he woke up 12 days later, disoriented and alone, on the streets of San Francisco. He had no memory of where he'd been or what had happened during that missing week and a half. Months later, during a return appearance on Coast to Coast AM, Mel shared the disturbing details. He had found needle marks on his arm and sticky residue left behind from what looked like medical tape, evidence that he'd likely been hooked up to an IV. But that wasn't all. His back molars were gone, surgically removed, with no explanation and no memory of how or why. Then came the final blow. When he attempted to withdraw money to get back home, he discovered that his bank account had been completely emptied. The millions he'd been paid to disappear? Gone, erased. According to Mel, no one knew when or why the hole had been dug, but the locals had been using it as an informal dumping site for as long as anyone could remember. Old appliances, garbage, even dead animals were tossed into it, yet the pit never filled. And stranger still, there was no sound, no splash, no thud, no echo. Things disappeared into the darkness. And that was that. Intrigued, Bell pressed for more. Mel explained that his curiosity had gotten the better of him, and he'd begun conducting some basic experiments, ones that would yield results even more unsettling than the silence of the hole itself. Determined to uncover the truth, Mel made his way back to his old property near Ellensburg. But the land had changed. His former neighbors told him that during his time in Australia, a major operation had taken place at the site: military vehicles, tents, surveillance. Then, one day, everything vanished overnight. The entire operation packed up and disappeared without a trace. And so had the hole. Where it once stood, there was nothing. No indentation in the earth, no stones, no sign it had ever existed. Mel had lost everything: his land, his money, his health, his past. But the story wasn't over yet. When he reconnected with Art Bell and shared this disturbing update, it caught the attention of an unexpected group, a Native American tribe living deep in the Nevada desert. And what they told Mel would send the mystery of the bottomless hole into an entirely new and terrifying direction. To Mel's astonishment, the Native American tribe revealed that they too had a pit, one with seemingly no bottom. Unlike the now erased hole in Washington, this one was known only to the tribe and a small group of Basque immigrants who had long used the surrounding land for sheep herding. Hidden deep within the Nevada desert, far from any maps or marked trails, lay another anomaly. When Mel arrived, he was stunned by the similarities. The pit was roughly 9 feet in diameter, just like the one he had once owned. It plunged into total darkness, giving the same dizzying sense of infinite depth. But there were crucial differences. This hole was reinforced with a metal collar, aged and weather-worn, with metal rings descending down its interior, disappearing into the abyss below. When Mel leaned closer, he noticed something else. The air around the hole felt thick, charged, as if humming with invisible electricity. Even the metal surrounding it felt unnaturally warm to the touch, as if it had been exposed to something beyond simple heat. At the tribe's request, Mel conducted a familiar experiment: the weighted fishing line test. Once again, thousands upon thousands of feet of line were fed into the void. No bottom, no resistance, nothing. But the group wasn't finished. Noting the strange warmth radiating from the hole's edge, they theorized it might be intensely hot inside, yet somehow hidden from view. To test this, they began lowering buckets of ice into the pit. What came back defied all logic. The ice didn't melt. Instead, it returned transformed. Its texture and composition altered, taking on the appearance of a coarse, crystalline salt-like substance. When they tried to melt it over an open flame, the impossible happened. It didn't melt. It caught fire. And once ignited, it continued to burn for months. Now convinced that the pit could alter the physical properties of matter, the group prepared for a more daring experiment. One of the locals volunteered to be lowered into the hole himself, but after much debate, the others convinced him to send in a sheep instead. That turned out to be no small task. Just like Mel's dogs back in Washington, the sheep went berserk the moment it was led near the hole, thrashing violently, bleating in terror, as if sensing something unspeakable lurking below. Despite the sheep's frantic panic, the team pressed on. They carefully lowered the terrified animal down nearly 1,000 feet into the abyss. At that depth, something strange happened. The sheep suddenly went completely still, its frantic thrashing replaced by a deep, resonant humming that seemed to rise up from the very earth itself. When the crate was hauled back to the surface, the sheep lay motionless, lifeless, but strangely intact. Unsure whether the creature had suffocated or perished by some other unknown means, the Basque herders decided to perform an autopsy to determine the cause of death. What they found was far from ordinary. As they cut open the carcass, they discovered the sheep had been cooked from the inside out. Its body cavity was filled with a large, black mass, a tumor-like growth that was still moving. Fear gripped the men, but curiosity won out. With trembling hands, they carefully sliced open the dark mass, and inside they found something utterly surreal. A tiny fetal creature, still attached to the sheep by a delicate umbilical cord. Mel later described it as resembling a baby seal, embryonic in form but exhibiting strange traits that seemed both aquatic and mammalian. The most disturbing detail, however, were its eyes. They were eerily human, deep, intelligent, and unsettling. The group watched in stunned silence as the creature, whatever it truly was, slowly crawled to the edge of the examination table, stretching its slimy body toward the mysterious hole. Without a word, Mel picked up the small being, slick with thick, viscous fluid, and carefully placed it at the very rim of the chasm. After a tense moment, the creature leapt into the abyss and vanished without a trace. As incredible as everything Mel had experienced sounded, it wasn't even the most astonishing part of his story. Shortly after returning from Nevada, Mel visited his oncologist and was stunned by the results. He was completely cancer-free. Neither Mel nor his doctor could explain the miraculous recovery. No treatment, no cure, just an inexplicable disappearance of the disease. Mel spent the remainder of his life convinced that the strange seal-like creature born from the sheep's tumor had something to do with his healing. In 2002, Mel made his final appearance on Art Bell's Coast to Coast AM. After 5 turbulent years, haunted by 2 bottomless pits, losing his land and fortune, and surviving what should have been a death sentence, Mel seemed to have finally reached his limit. He never called back, never responded to emails or messages. Rumors whispered that he had been abducted once more, this time with his memory wiped clean, permanently erased. Whatever the truth, Mel was an old man by then. Cancer-free or not, he wouldn't live forever. But as for the pits themselves, their secrets were already out. With the military withdrawn and official interest vanished, it was only a matter of time before someone else tried to find the hole again. Since Mel's story first aired on the radio, countless people have been obsessed with the idea of seeing the bottomless hole with their own eyes. In the years following Mel's revelations, access to the site became increasingly difficult. Mel had been clear. The military had taken control of the land and was prepared to use deadly force to keep anyone away. But as time passed and with the rise of the internet and advances in satellite imaging technology, a new generation of investigators began to piece together the puzzle. Though actual footage of the hole remains exceedingly rare, many believe that's because it has long since been covered up by the military, a claim that only adds weight to Mel's warnings before his disappearance. Then, sometime in the 2010s, a chilling video surfaced online. It purported to show a team of researchers using a drone to explore the infamous pit. For months, this group had scoured archival satellite images, radio transcripts, and old topographic maps, painstakingly triangulating the most likely location of the Ellensburg site. Finally, they identified a circular depression in a remote wilderness area that matched all known descriptions. With ground access blocked, the team deployed a high-tech aerial drone to investigate from above. Equipped with thermal imaging and high-resolution optics, the compact drone soared above the dense forest canopy, scanning relentlessly for any signs of disturbance. After some time, the device detected a patch where the soil appeared distinctly darker than the surrounding earth. Drawing closer, the drone revealed a vast hole, perfectly matching the descriptions Mel had shared all those years ago. The team's excitement grew as they began to collect data, attempting to measure the hole's depth and temperature. But then, the readings started to behave erratically, fluctuating wildly with no clear explanation. Shortly after, the drone's GPS began sending error messages, as if struggling to pinpoint its own location. Undeterred, and seeing that the video feed was still active, the team decided to lower the drone directly into the pit. For a few tense seconds, the operators fought to maintain control against a rising tide of static interference. Then, without warning, the signal went dead. The drone disappeared into the abyss, and was never seen again. The grainy footage from the incident quickly spread across the internet, captivating conspiracy theorists and skeptics alike. Yet no group has ever stepped forward to claim responsibility for the mission. In the weeks that followed, rumors began swirling about increased activity around the site. Was it coincidence? Or had the military returned, perhaps to erase all traces before another group attempted to uncover the truth? As with much of Mel's story, the truth may forever remain out of reach. So, what should we make of it? Skeptics are quick to dismiss the tale as contrived fiction. After all, no one besides Mel Waters has ever come forward claiming to have seen the hole or even knows its location. Public records for a Mel Waters in Kittitas County are non-existent. Was it a pseudonym? Possibly. Or perhaps, some argue, Mel Waters never existed at all. Numerous expeditions have tried, and failed, to locate the site. One of the most publicized efforts was in 2002, led by tribal medicine man Gerald Osborne. Despite extensive searches, no verifiable trace of the hole was found. Satellite imagery has occasionally revealed unusual depressions in the area, but none precisely match the descriptions given. The closest candidate turned out to be an old, abandoned well, not bottomless by any means. To many, Mel's story fits the exact mold of a late-night radio legend, the kind of tale Art Bell might share to captivate listeners and spark conversation. Bell himself claimed to have sent teams to the site, reporting evidence like tread marks and boot prints suggesting military presence. Yet, it's just as plausible that Mel was simply spinning stories, a lonely man crafting myths to entertain himself during late-night broadcasts. Scientifically, the idea of a bottomless pit is nearly impossible. In his first interview, Mel claimed to have lowered more than 80,000 feet of fishing line, almost 3 times the height of Mount Everest, without reaching the bottom. Not only would it be unlikely to have that much fishing line available, but geologists argue the line would have melted or degraded due to the intense heat and pressure deep within the earth. As for the pit itself, the consensus is that such a structure would collapse under its own weight long before reaching such depths, making a truly bottomless hole geologically implausible. Unless, of course, this hole possessed extraordinary properties that defy the very laws of physics. Some more open-minded thinkers propose that the pit doesn't necessarily need to exist as a physical place to be real. They suggest it could be a portal, a gateway to another dimension, another place, or even another time. Mel was unwavering in his conviction that there was something profoundly unnatural about the pit on his land, something that terrified animals and caused electronic devices to malfunction inexplicably. If the later drone footage is genuine, it would confirm the strange interference Mel described happening with his radio. Could the hole be a tear in the fabric of space and time? That would explain the baffling fact that Mel's radio reportedly picked up broadcasts from decades past, including old baseball games from over 30 years ago. And what about its bizarre effects on living beings? The story of the dog seemingly returning from the dead and the mysterious entity found inside the sheep aligns eerily with other reports of space-time anomalies, phenomena known to produce exotic and unexplained occurrences. Ironically, one of the strongest arguments supporting Mel's truthfulness may come from his very critics. Skeptics often claim that Mel used a service called TerraServer to find a blacked-out area on satellite maps, then falsely claim the hole was on his land, an attempt to convince web sleuths that the government was actively hiding the site. But there's a critical flaw in this theory. TerraServer wasn't launched until 6 months after Mel's first call to Coast AM, meaning there was no way he could have known the area would appear blacked out after the fact. Many still believe Mel's hole is just another urban legend, a myth born on late-night radio waves and sustained by the endless whispers of the internet. But if that's true, then why does the land where the hole supposedly existed remains so cloaked in secrecy? There's no escaping the fact that Mel's Hole reads like a classic campfire tale, a story told in hushed tones, full of wonder and fear. But others insist it's far more than just a legend. They say it's the account of a man who stumbled upon something extraordinary and paid the ultimate price when powerful forces sought to erase him and everything he owned to keep it hidden. Skeptics dismiss the tale as geological fantasy, an impossibility by all scientific standards. But believers argue the whole defies conventional science because it's not bound by the laws we understand. Perhaps we will never truly get to the bottom of this mystery, literally or figuratively, if it ever existed at all. The story survives, not through evidence, but through possibility. In a world dominated by facts and reason, there remains a sliver of space for the unknown. And maybe, just maybe, that's what makes Mel's Hole such a haunting and enduring legend.